The artistry, the excitement, the magnetism of the Mario Bauza Orchestra, and all of the impact of the Latin scene on American life. I have on the line Andy Gonzalez, who is very important to this scene. He was a friend of Mario Bauza's, observer of his career, and a performing artist in his own right. He lives on the East Coast, and I welcome him to the mid-continent, upper mid-continent here, Minnesota. Come in, Andy.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me on your show, Leigh. I think it's extremely important that everybody know how much a catalyst to all kinds of music Mario Bauza was. Not only as I guess his main role was like sort of a musical director of the highest caliber. You know, he was responsible for changes in tastes and progression in Latin music. And I think that he's, well, what can I say about him? He was he's like the granddaddy of all of us, you know, that have been striving to move our music forward, you know.
You were describing earlier when we talked how versatile he was as an instrumentalist, and that's something that I don't think everyone knew except those who worked with him, like Machito and Graciela and all of the members of the band that he worked with, and in terms of Dizzy and all of you.
Yeah, well, Mario was a child prodigy on the woodwind instruments, and came up, and when he got to New York, he hadn't played the trumpet. You know, that wasn't one of his instruments, and there was a recording session coming up by Antonio Machin, who was one of the pioneers of El Son. He was one of the great soneros of the day, you know, the Cuban vocalists that used to improvise in that music. Well, he was one of the greats, and he had a recording session in New York, and he was stuck for a trumpet player, and because that music calls for one trumpet that's like a sort of like a lead instrument and a soloist behind the vocalist. And Mario knew the tradition of how the trumpet sounds in that music, just because he grew up around it. And he just said, "Get me a trumpet, and I'll in 2 weeks I'll be ready." And in 2 weeks, I had the recording session, and he took his first trumpet solos on those records, and did some great solos. They were, technique, sound, amazing.
And so he really applied that too, also to his career with Cab Calloway, didn't he?
Well, of course. Well, what happened is that after that date, he managed to hook up with the Chick Webb Orchestra, became their lead trumpet player, and he used to rehearse the band. That's one of the functions that he did that was very important. He did it for the Machito Orchestra all the time that he was there, and that's rehearse the band and make sure that they perform the music up to standard. You know, he was very meticulous about the way he wanted the sections of a big band to sound. He honed that craft with Chick Webb, and refined it more with the Cab Calloway band. When he joined that band, he used to do the same. He'd separate the sections and make them rehearse by themselves, and then put it together, and get it to sound as tight and as with all the kind of phrasing that was involved, and to his satisfaction. And he had very, very high standards. And that's, it's a very, very important man.
You worked under him at one point or another?
I was called, I've been fortunate to have worked with the Machito Orchestra when he was there. And, he used to give me pointers, and I was nervous because I was a young whippersnapper in those days.
How old were you?
Oh, I'd say about 19 or 20, and I was thrilled to play those classic charts, which a lot of them are, they've been in the soundtrack, in and out of the soundtrack of my life, at different points. My parents used to love the Machito Orchestra, so they used to have the records, and I used to hear them, all the time I was growing up. To play them charts was really, amazing, because Machito's music is very well arranged, and arranged by masterful. Mario used to get the best arrangers to do those charts, especially when Rene Hernandez came in on piano. He's a Cuban pianist, and in around 1946, he joined the band. Machito's band it started around 39 or 40. But around the middle 40s is when Rene Hernandez came in. Mario and him collaborated, and they created a whole new sound and a whole new standard in Latin American big band music. Because up till then, there were bands in Cuba that were pretty good, but imagine coming out of the big band, the best of the big bands, and that whole style of American big bands, and with all that knowledge that he gained to apply that to the Machito Orchestra, they became like top shelf. That was the standard. That band reached heights in big band sound and style, and they could hold their own on any stage with any big band.
I can remember, the Palladian Ballroom and Machito on stand there with Tito Puente on another night, Tito Rodriguez. Out in this part of the world, seldom have audiences here had a chance to taste the Afro-Cuban and the salsa movement in quite the way that those ballrooms presented the bands.
Oh yeah, well, because in those days it was acoustics. It was natural acoustics to hear a big band. They rehearsed and played so much and so often that they had their own internal balance. You didn't have to rely on any sound engineers. There was probably a microphone for the vocalist and maybe a microphone for the soloist or piano or something like that, but that was it. The big band created its own sound.
And everybody could shade and color dynamically, couldn't they?
Exactly. I caught the tail end of that. I was fortunate to see a few bands play acoustically, big bands, So, and I was fortunate to see all three and work with all three, the three giants, Puente, Machito, and Tito Rodriguez.
Andy Gonzalez, I certainly appreciate your observations on this historic movement that Mario Bauza and you all have...
and everything that has... the reason Latin music had progressed and reached standards of greatness is because of Mario Bauza.
Do you think, for example, America would be dancing rumbas and cha-cha-chas and merengues and other themes and ideas in the style of dance if Mario Bauza hadn't been there?
They might have, because there were other figures. But as far as taking a real typical Cuban sound and refining it without diluting the rhythm quality of Cuban music, and just adding this marvelous American panorama of music. It's a whole. It's hard to really put into words how great that was.